Hello, everyone. This is me, Vibhor Bansal from NASCOM. I welcome you all to the webinar. Today, we are going to talk about accelerating our growth, our success at our work as well as in our life. You might have got a gist of the webinar from the communications that has been rolling around. Uh, so I won't take much more time there, but I would like to introduce you to our speaker of the day, Chandramouli Venkatesan, who is the CEO for special projects at Pidilite Industries. Chandramouli, or Molly, as people fondly call him, has been has 26 plus years of experience in industry, having worked in Asian Paints, Cadbury's, Mondelez, Onida, Pidilite in the senior role. Last as a MD for Cadbury's, Mondelez, right, Molly?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. He's a best-selling author of a book called Catalyst, where so uh, all the things that you hear from today's session are the extract of his book, and I believe everybody would like to read that book again. I read the abstract only. Sorry, Molly, I couldn't read the full book, but yeah, it's really very interesting. So he's talking about how you can mix all ingredients of your skills and take them to succeed in your at your work as well as in your life. I would like to here thank Priya Ajmera, who is the lead for technology track at Encore Accelerator. She's the one who brought in Molly and helped everything put together for this session. Thank you, Priya, for all your efforts. I would not take much
Thanks,
of a time.
Vibhor.
And I won't take much of a time. Then just make one announcement. Please, at the end of the session, do give us a feedback. You will see a feedback form on the screen as soon as webinar ends. It won't take more than 30 seconds of yours. Just 2 questions asked. Uh, I will not take. So, Molly, I have taken enough of time. Over to you now, and hope everybody enjoys it.
Thank you, Vibhor. Thank you, Priya, for organizing the session. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar. You see the slide in front of you. It says Catalyst. And there's an interesting tagline there which says the ultimate strategies on how to win at work and in life. I've been a marketeer all my life, and my publisher Penguin said that marketeers at times are tend to over-promising, and this does look like an over-promise to say how can one book be the ultimate strategy on how to win at work and in life. But I said I'll hang on to that tagline because that's the mission with which I've written that book, to say, can I help people succeed? Can I help them win at work and in life? And that's the mission with which I wrote this book. As you engage around the topic for the next 1 hour with me, I would ask you to have 3 mindsets. The first mindset is a very open mindset. There'll be a lot of new information coming your way. I would request you to be open and process it. The second mindset is I want you to wear 2 hats as you listen to this information. One is how does this help you? But the second hat that I also want you to wear is how can you use this information to help others? So I want you to wear 2 hats. And the third mindset is I will be a little provocative and push you towards idealism. And I want you to allow yourself to be idealistic for an hour and absorb that input. So I would encourage you to have these 3 mindsets. The start of any session, there must always be a good disclaimer. And I must say that with reference to the book, this book is primarily a personal point of view. It's a means to success based on my point of view and my beliefs. This is not scientifically proven or validated. So it has not gone through a research protocol, a validation protocol to say this works. And a topic like succeeding in work and in life is a complex topic. There could be many ways of succeeding in work and life. This is just one point of view which I am writing. If you have a point of view which is different than mine, by all means hang on to it. I mean, my point of view is not proven. It is not the only one. I want to start with playing a video first, which is really about the story about the book, how the book even came around being. And I just want to start with the video. It's a very brief video. Important milestone of my book Catalyst going live and reaching the bookstores. I want to share with you the story behind writing the book. Many people have been asking me why I wrote the book, what motivated me, how was the process of writing a book, etc. The journey to writing the book began 4 years back when I was in a regional Asia Pacific role. And that meant frequent international travel. I set myself a routine in that each trip on the return flight, I would spend time penning down thoughts to the question, what makes people successful? And over many flights, it developed into a great collection of insights. Then in 2016, when I took a sabbatical, I want to use that time to give back to society. After a lot of thought, I decided the best way to give back would be to take my learnings public. In a period of 4 months, I did 30 sessions covering 18 companies and over 1,000 people, all for free. The sessions got a tremendous response, and many people encouraged me to write a book, and so was born Catalyst. These 30 sessions also helped me sharpen my message. I knew what people easily understood, where they had many questions, where they needed examples. And the learnings from all those 30 sessions has gone into distilling the message in the book Catalyst. I had named these sessions Tee Off with Molly after my golfing passion. A tee shot is the first shot in golf, and a good tee shot is a spectacular sight. The ball soars over 250 yards, and that's like 3 sixes of 80 yards in cricket, back to back to back. And my mission with these sessions was to help people soar like the golf ball, long and high. And that is my mission with my book Catalyst. I hope reading this book is going to help you soar long and high. My name is Chandramouli Venkatesan, and my aspiration is to be a catalyst for your success. So that just gave you a picture of the story behind the book, and the mission of the book is to help people soar. And I think in the context of success, and success is a very holistic topic, I deal with a slightly narrower version of success, which is succeeding in careers. And for career success, I have developed this simple equation, which is that career growth is equal to what I call real individual growth plus or minus environmental factors. Let me quickly explain what I mean by real individual growth. Imagine your aspiration is to be the chairman of a large IT company in India. Now that requires for a certain level of capability, skills, knowledge, etc. You have a current level of capability, skills, and knowledge. If you grow yourself, if you grow your capabilities, your skills, your knowledge, your decision making, your leadership, your people handling, your communication, if you grow yourself all the way to the level that is required to be the chairperson of a large IT company, then that is the journey that will take you there. So that process of growing yourself is what I call real individual growth. Are you able to grow the package called you? Are you able to grow your capabilities, your skills, your knowledge, your judgment, your communication, your leadership, your people management, your project management? The package called you, are you able to grow yourself? And your career growth will be directly proportionate to how much you can grow yourself. The second factor that impacts careers is environmental factors. Now environmental factors can be both headwinds and tailwinds. A good example of a tailwind is, imagine you are in a job and you are learning the job, you are not yet perfect at it, but your boss quits. And as your boss quits, the company in its wisdom decides it would rather have an insider do that job than bring an outsider. And in the process, you end up getting promoted to your boss's job, even when you are not fully ready. Now, this is the example of a tailwind. You are not yet fully ready, but luck favored you and you got the boss's job. Similarly, headwinds happen in careers. The exact opposite can also happen, where you're fully ready for your boss's job, but your boss has put Fevicol in the chair and sat down and is not, going to move anywhere, is not going to budge anywhere. And hence the opportunity doesn't come. Yeah. And that is an example of a headwind. Now, typically in our careers, in the environmental factors, we will all experience both headwinds and tailwinds. There'll be some times when the environment is a tailwind for our career, and there'll be some durations where the environment is a headwind for our career. However, interestingly, what happens is careers are 40 years long. We start in our 20s and pack up by our 60s. In a 40-year period, the combination of headwind and tailwind balances each other. So you'll have some headwinds, you will have some tailwinds, but sum total it balances each other. You have to be a very lucky person for more tailwinds and headwinds in your career, and you have to be very unlucky for more headwinds and tailwinds in your career. The headwinds and tailwinds balances each other out, and hence what it really means that your sum total of your career growth will be equal to your real individual growth. How much you grow yourself, your capabilities, skills, knowledge, judgment, decision making, people management, leadership, communication, how much you grow yourself will be equal to your career growth. And in a very simple way, saying it provocatively, if you don't experience career growth, it really means you haven't yet grown yourself. That's a simple philosophy I like to have towards careers. And a simple way of saying it is, we all know the phrase, you get what you deserve. In careers, I find that most of us are focused on how do we get more. We are focused on the getting side. How do I get the next job, the next promotion, the next salary? We are not focused on deserving more. And in you get what you deserve, my advocacy on careers is if we focus more on deserving, then we will automatically get. And that's a simple promise I want to leave with you. And the simplest validation for this is that I'm yet to meet somebody who I have seen has grown themselves, who has done real individual growth, but have not had a career. Sometimes people say, oh, this philosophy is fine, but doesn't work in the real world. But even if you go to the real world, as I say, I'm yet to meet somebody who has grown their capability, skills, and knowledge, but has not had a great career. And I will ask you to do a simple exercise for you to validate yourself. Make 2 sheets of paper. In 1 sheet of paper, write the names of all people who you think grew themselves fantastically. They grew their capability, skills, and knowledge. But for some reason, their career did not grow proportionate to how much they grew themselves. So they grew their capabilities to be vice president, but in their career, they became only managers. So write a list of such people in 1 sheet of paper, the first list. The second list, make the exact opposite, which is answering the question, how did this idiot get here? Which is people who didn't deserve to get to the levels they got to. They possibly should have stopped as manager, but somehow managed to become vice presidents. Yeah, I have done this exercise many times. After you complete this exercise, I will ask you to do one thing. Compare the length of the 2 lists. Every time I have done this exercise, the second list is many times longer than the first list, which is the people who didn't deserve a career but got it, is much longer. The first list, which is people who actually grew themselves but did not have a career, is very small. And normally, many times when I have done this exercise, I can't even find one person to put in this list. Which really what it means is if you grow yourself, if you drive real individual growth, it is impossible for a career not to happen for you. Real individual growth always results in careers. And that is the philosophy with which I want to leave you with. And in the catalyst, this is the first chapter. And then I have 13 chapters on how do you drive that real individual growth? How do you drive growth for yourself? And there are 3 pieces you have to solve for real individual growth. The first is how do you improve your learning model? All of us are keen to learn. We sometimes go to training program, you come to a webinar, you take different experiences. So we are keen to learn, but we are not trying to improve our learning model, which is the pace at which we learn. If we improve our learning model, what you can get out of this webinar today in the same 1 hour, if your learning model is better, you will get more out of it than if your learning model is low. So the first thing we have to do to grow ourselves is to improve our learning model. The second thing we have to do is career management. And this is not career management from a lens of how do I get the next job, next salary, next grade. This is more about how do I make choices in my career which maximize my real individual growth, which maximize my learning and my capability. What kind of choices should I make in my career to be able to do that? That is the second piece that you have to solve for. And the third piece that we have to solve for is how do we bring life into the equation, which is our success at work is not just a function of what we do at work. It's also greatly a function of how we live our life and the nature of people and person we are. How do we bring the person that we are into the equation of success? So these are the three key levers for real individual growth, and I'm going to briefly describe each one of them for you. Starting with the learning model. One of the greatest myths we have is the concept of experience. Our understanding of experience is that experience is measured in years. So somebody will say, I have 5 years experience of project management. Somebody will say, I have 5 years experience of customer handling, so on and so forth. 5 years is only the input. Experience is the output. Input cannot be equal to output. Somebody can work for 5 years and get 8 years experience out of it. And somebody can work for 5 years and get only 2 years experience out of it. How much experience you get from a given time is a function of how good your learning model is. And experience is the output. It is not the input. So the first myth we have to break in our heads is the concept that experience is equal to time. Which then brings us to the question, what is then experience? Yeah, if experience is not equal to time and all your life you have written CVs, and in CVs you write how many years you have worked where. If experience is not equal to time, what is experience? The way I like to think about experience is, what is the purpose of experience? When I hire, let's say when I'm in a hiring situation and I'm hiring for a job and I see two candidates. One candidate has worked for 15 years, the other candidate has worked for 10 years. My implicit assumption is that in my business, in a future situation, when faced with a future situation, the response of the person who's worked for 15 years will be better than the response of the person who has worked for 10 years. Hence, the purpose of experience for me is not what the person has done before, but what will that person do in the future based on what they have done better before. And hence, the purpose of experience is your ability to respond to the future situation. It is not, experience is not what you have done. It is what you will do based on what you have done. And hence, I like to define experience as the algorithm that is inside us. As we do stuff, we keep building this algorithm. You can call it an algorithm, you can call it a software, a program, a CPU, whatever. As we keep doing stuff, this algorithm keeps getting built. And this is the algorithm that responds to future situation. So when you face a situation in the future, this algorithm responds and it generates a solution. So the more experienced person is that person whose algorithm is powerful. The more experienced person is not that person who spent more time at work. The purpose of time at work, the purpose of the number of years is to build a powerful algorithm. But years is not the experience. The experience is the algorithm. And let me give you a simple example to illustrate this. So imagine one night I'm feeling very hungry. It's 1 o'clock in the night and I'm feeling very hungry. So I go in search of food. I take my car and start driving around. I search for 30 minutes and I finally find a restaurant called Shetty. Yeah. So after 30 minutes, I found Shetty's restaurant and I eat food. So now that situation has happened. I put time into that situation. Now, what is the experience I get out of it? I can get an experience out of it to say in the future, the level at which I can stop is in the future when I feel hungry in the night, I must go to Shetty. So that is one level of experience I can get. But that is just information, that is not the algorithm. If I want to convert this to an algorithm, I can then find out that actually where I went to Shetty, the Shetty was opposite the railway station. And hence, I can have it in my algorithm to say in the future when I feel hungry in the night, I must find the nearest railway station, because typically food places will be open near the railway station throughout the night, and hence I can go there for finding food. So now if I had left it at the level of when I am hungry, go to Shetty, that is a low level algorithm. The next level of the algorithm is when I am hungry, find the nearest railway station. The next level of the algorithm is I go to a town where there is no railways at all. Am I able to extend this algorithm to say, maybe the bus terminus also has the food joints? Yeah. And it is the nearest transport terminus. So now the same amount of time, I spent half an hour looking for Shetty. The time is the same. One person can look half an hour for Shetty and they can build an experience algorithm which says when hungry, find Shetty. Somebody else spending half an hour can build an experience algorithm which says when hungry, find the nearest railway station. Somebody else can spend half an hour looking for food and build an experience algorithm which says when hungry in the night, look for the nearest transport junction. Now, same amount of time has resulted in 3 different experience algorithms. That is what I mean to say, if you want to drive real individual growth, then you must be effective in converting time to experience. And in my judgment, the single biggest difference between successful people and less successful people is their ability to convert time to experience. Successful people are simply more effective at converting time to experience. Less successful people put in the same amount of time but are ineffective in converting their time to experience. Less successful people, when they put in time, they stop at the Shetty level. More successful people, when they put in time, build an algorithm which says when hungry, find the nearest transport terminus. So if you want to be successful, then you have to build a mechanism of how are you going to convert your time to experience. And Catalyst, the book, has 4 chapters which will help you on how you can convert time to experience. The second piece that you have to solve in your journey to be successful is career management. Now, all of us know the story of the hare and the tortoise, and the moral of the story, which is slow and steady wins the race. Now, sometimes I like to ask people, do you like that as a moral for careers? Would you like a career moral of slow and steady wins the race? And most people don't like. They don't like the word slow for careers. They don't mind fast and steady wins the race, but they don't like the word slow for careers. I also don't advocate that you be the tortoise in your career, but I certainly advocate do not try and be the rabbit in your career. Careers are 40 years long, and a 40-year career cannot be won and succeeded in the first 10 years. The moral I advocate for careers is win where it matters. And where it matters that you win in your career is the second half of your career. Now, careers can be split into 2 halves, a first half and a second half. Doesn't have to be mathematically equal. They are roughly similar in time. It can be 20 years, it can be 22 years and 18 years, it can be 25 years, 15 years. That doesn't matter. Careers have 2 halves. And here is what I have observed watching many people through their careers. What I've observed is most people are successful in the first half of their careers, and very few are successful in the second half of their careers. And if I have to say it provocatively, I'll say even idiots succeed in the first half of their careers, and even good people fail in the second half of their careers. The interesting thing is second half is where true achievement happens, and you can check this again and again and again. If you take out 2 engineers passing out from the same college, you will find that every engineer becomes the head of a factory or a plant at the end of their first half. So 95 out of 100 engineers will become the head of a plant at the end of the first half of their careers. But out of that 95 who succeeded in the first half, only one of them will become the head of a global supply chain of a global multinational corporation at the end of second half. Yeah. 2 people do CA and pass out. At the end of first half, they'll be head of some companies accounting department, some companies finance department. Everybody at the end of first half and finance will be heading a finance department or account department somewhere. 95 out of 100. But only one out of them will become a CEO or the global head of finance of a mega corporation. So you will find that first half success is similar. Second half is where very few people succeed. And hence, if you want great success in your career, then you have to figure out how can you succeed in the second half of your career. That is the most important thing to plan for career success. Now, the interesting thing is that the performance in the second half is not just a function of what you do in the second half. It's also greatly a function of what is the foundation building that you do in the first half. Ian Chappell, the famous Australian cricket commentator, used to say, and most of you possibly know this cricket stadium called Perth in Australia, which is known to be the bounciest pitch in the world, and it's very difficult for batsmen to play. And Ian Chappell used to say that if you want a great test career, then you must know how to play the bouncing ball before you play your first test match at Perth. You cannot come to your first test match at Perth and then learn how to play the bouncing ball. The second half is something like that. If you want to win in the second half of your career, then you have to know how to win in the second half before you reach the second half. The first half is a good batting pitch. The second half of careers is a bouncy batting pitch. And you have to prepare to succeed in the second half right in the first half. And I like to give the analogy of a tall tower to say if your aspiration in your career is to build a tall tower, then a tall tower, requires a lot of time to be spent in the foundation building. Yeah, you cannot build a tall tower without spending time in foundation building. So to prepare a career of a tall tower, you have to build the foundation. But what happens is, as we are building the foundation for the tall tower, our friend or a neighbor builds a short tower, builds it fast, then a ribbon cutting happens, the inauguration happens, sweets get distributed, and celebration happens. And we who are still building the foundation, we start feeling jealous. Oh, he already built a short tower and got inauguration and celebration. I am still in the foundation stage. And we also end up then moving from building the foundation for a tall tower to putting a foundation for a short tower, and we start to celebrate the fact that we got a here and now promotion, here and now foundation for a short tower. Yeah, I think the important thing is to recognize that there is no ROI for focusing on the first half. The ROI is in focusing for the second half. I mean, one of the simplest ways I like to say it is, if you get a promotion in the first half, then you get a few lakh of rupees more salary. Yeah, so if you get promoted from manager to senior manager in the first half, you get a few lakh of rupees more. But you get a promotion in the second half where you go from being vice president to CEO, then you get a few crore of rupees. Which promotion would you rather have? Would you have one extra promotion in the first half, or would you like one extra promotion in the second half? So the focus for career management has to be to say, how can I win in the second half of my career? You can manage your career for two outcomes. You can either manage your career for feeling successful, that is one outcome, or you can manage your career for the outcome of preparing to be successful. Yeah. Now, in most cases, when you make choices in your career, the choices might be similar for both outcomes. What makes you feel successful is what is required for preparing to be successful. Those are the easy choices to make because it meets both outcomes. But there will be some career choices which are different for the two outcomes, which is the career choice which is required to be made to prepare yourself to succeed in the second half is different from the career choice which makes you successful here and now. Those are the difficult career choices to make. And in those career choices, I strongly advocate, please focus on preparing for success in the second half. That is where the ROI is. That is where success is. Everybody succeeds in the second half. very few succeed in the second. Everybody succeeds in the first half, very few succeed in the second half, and hence you must put your energy and your preparation to say, how can I succeed in the second half of my career? What kind of preparation, what kind of foundation building I need for the second half of my career? And one of the career choices that people make all the time in the first half and in foundation building is quitting and joining. Everybody quits a company, joins a new company. And I often find that people make this decision quite poorly, and this often significantly disturbs their career's path and significantly disturbs how successful they will be in the second half. So I made a video on this, on the decision to quit and how to make it well. Hello, everybody. Have you ever thought about quitting your job? Everybody has, sometimes or other, in their career. I've observed often people make these decisions poorly. Quitting from your current job and joining a new company is a major decision, and getting it wrong can severely impact your career. People get this decision wrong because they often make it based on instinct and advice from others, as opposed to clear criteria and a good decision making process. My book titled Catalyst will help you convert this decision from an instinct and advice based decision to a principles and criteria based decision. The starting point is to separate the quit and the join decision. To quit from your current company because you found a better opportunity outside can be a poor decision. In a marriage analogy, it is like leaving your spouse because you found somebody else more attractive. There must be valid reasons to leave your spouse, and that can't be, I found somebody else. Similarly, in careers, quitting because you found a better opportunity outside can be the root cause for many mistakes. You must have sound reasons to quit, which are different from the reasons to join elsewhere. If there is no reason to quit, there is no need to quit. Making the quit decision independent of the join decision and before the join decision is good career management. Once you disaggregate the quit and the join decision, there are three questions. First, what are the criteria to make a good quit decision? Second, what are the criteria to decide where to join? And third, once you make these two decisions, how do you double check if you indeed got them right? Because these decisions are irreversible. The book Catalyst, written by me, will help you make this decision well. My name is Chandramouli Venkatesan, and my aspiration is to be a catalyst for your success. And I have a full chapter on how to make the quit decision well and the join decision well in the book. The third area of real individual growth which you've got to solve for is how do you make your life a catalyst? All of us have heard this term work-life balance. And here is a very interesting cartoon on it. It says the secret to having a rewarding work-life balance is to have no life. Then it's easy to keep things balanced by doing no work. The simple thing, if you have no work and no life, then you are in balance. But none of us are in that stage. But honestly, I find this work-life balance like a one-way street. In a one-way street, a traffic flows in only one direction. The work-life balance is also one way, which is all our conversations is all about what is the impact that work is having on life. In my judgment, the impact that work has on life is much lesser than the impact that life has on work. And we do not spend enough time reflecting on the opposite direction, which is how can we live our life in such a way that we can be more effective at work. A great anecdote of this comes from the life of Albert Einstein, the famous Nobel Prize winner and the physicist and scientist. And Einstein goes on to say that he believes that he was successful as a scientist because he was a passionate player of the violin in his life. In effect, what he is saying is that what he did in his life made him more successful at work. The challenge for us is what we do in our life. If we were to take another example for it, For succeeding at work, we have to be great team players. We all operate in teams, we help each other, and the better the team player we are, we'll be more successful at work. Now, somebody has played a lot of team sports in their life. Will that impact their effectiveness at work? I would think so. Does not mean if you have not played team sports, you will not be a good team player. But it's a good example of how what we do in our life also impacts at how we work. Yeah. The thing is that what we do in our life is accidental. It is not purposive. Whether we play team sports or whether we play Albert Einstein's violin and he played the violin was accidental. He didn't play the violin so as to become a better physicist. We don't play team sports to say we will become better at work. We just do it accidentally. I think the question is, can we do it more purposively? Can we live our life in certain way such that the life becomes a catalyst for success at work? And there are two areas of life which I recommend we structure. The first is our hobbies, and I have a full chapter on hobbies. I believe that there are certain hobbies which, if we have, has a very high impact on how effective we will be at work. And I like to call them passionate, striving hobbies. In a very simple way, there must be a huge amount of striving involved, and you must be very passionate about it. And I would urge you to read that chapter to understand more about the nature of hobbies you can have. The second area of life which makes a difference at effectiveness at work is your personal values. And values have a huge impact on how successful you can be at work. Now, again, a lot of the corporate speak on values is one dimensional. The focus is on don't screw up on your values. Don't do sexual harassment, don't do conflict of interest, don't do integrity issues, don't do fraud. And I think unknown to us, there is a subconscious coding in our head that we must not go below an acceptable level on values. We do not think that there is an upside from values, which is if we become exemplary in some value, there is a great career. If we become exemplarily honest, it benefits our career. We don't think like that. And that is the push I would like to give you people to say we have to rewire our thinking, which is currently saying minimize the downside of values. We have to bring that to how to leverage the upside of values. And that is the second aspect of life that I want to touch on. And one of the values I want to touch about is honesty and integrity. The beauty of honesty and integrity is everybody is honest. I'm yet to meet somebody in my 50 years of life who by themselves say I'm dishonest. Everybody is honest. Nobody says they are dishonest. And the reason that is possible is because there is no prescribed standard for honesty. There is no examination, there is no pass mark above which you pass and below which you fail. So everybody gets to set their pass mark themselves. So if I am practicing honesty at 60 marks, then I say honesty pass mark is 50. If I get 50 marks, then I set the pass mark at 40. If I get 40 marks, I can set the pass mark at 30. So everybody, irrespective of what is their current practice of honesty, sets the standard of honesty below their current practice, and hence everybody feels they are honest. So the key to honesty is to figure out how to set the right standard. And I would invite your attention to the 2x2 axis, which is on the right side. And on the right side of that axis, on the vertical axis, there is I do right and I do wrong. And on the horizontal side, there is others do right and others do wrong. This is what I call the quadrant of the deviants, which is people who insist on doing wrong even when others do right. These are the murderers, the criminals, the frauds. It's a very, very small percentage of population. Hopefully God will bless them and reform them. Bulk of us fall into what I call the majority honesty quadrant, which is we do right when others do right. But we are very, 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 very comfortable doing wrong when others do wrong. And a great example of this is in our traffic signals in India. In a traffic signal, right and wrong is determined by the color of the signal. So if the signal is red, then right means you have to stop and wrong is you go. But our behavior is not determined by the color of the signal. Our behavior is determined by others. So even if the signal is red, if everybody has stopped at the signal, we will stop. But if everybody is ignoring the signal and going, then we will also go. So we are happy doing wrong when others do wrong. And when we do wrong that way, we do not think that makes us dishonest. We still think we are honest despite doing wrong. If you want to actually be truly honest, then you have to reach a level where you are able to say that I will do right even when others do wrong. That is when you are truly honest, which is you are making your decisions based on right and wrong versus what others do. So the key driver to high integrity is our ability to change our standard of honesty. Our current standard of honesty is what is acceptable. From there, we have to change our honesty standard to what is right. We have to make our choices to the question, answering the question, what is right to do, not what is acceptable to do. Now, your right can be different from my right, and I have no problems with that. There are some areas which is defined by the law. There, everybody's right is the same. But there are many areas which is not defined by the law, and you can have a different interpretation of right than mine. But as long as you have made the choice based on what is right, that is integrity. If you have made the choice based on what is acceptable, that is majority honesty. And we have to reset our standard on integrity to be able to truly get to the high integrity position. Now, one of the big barriers to getting to high integrity is the need for payback. We often say, I stood in the signal, everybody broke the signal, that person has gained 1 minute advantage over me. So I'm actually paying a price for being honest. Yeah. But we have a sense of saying being honest, there is no payback, and being dishonest, there is a payback. I have two pushbacks on this. The first pushback is, as human beings, should we be doing right because we need a payback? Is that how we should be as human beings? Or as human beings, should we be doing right because it's simply the right thing to do? That is one pushback. But having said that, I'm also convinced that there is a huge payback to high integrity. And that payback comes in two forms. The first is the leadership impact it allows you to create. High integrity is equal to high leadership impact. And the greatest example of this in our country was Gandhiji, whose leadership impact was extraordinary because he was a very high integrity person. And 250 million population followed him through a difficult journey of independence because he was high integrity. The second payback comes through how others help us. None of us succeed based only on what we do. We also succeed based on how others help us. Each one of you is helping others at work. You're not only doing your own work, you're also helping others at work. Now, are you helping everybody uniformly? The answer is no. We tend to help some people more. We go out of our way to help some people more. And there are some people we don't enjoy helping at all, and we do the least that is possible. And if you subconsciously assess who are the people you help more, you will find that it is based on a combination of relationship and people who you think have high values. People who have high values, you tend to help more. People who have poor values, you tend to help less. The same thing applies the opposite way. If we tend to have high values, then a lot more people will help us succeed. So the payback comes in the form of how others help us. And values is a huge means to how you can become successful at work. So to summarize, there are three things you have to do to drive success for yourself. One is, how do you grow your learning and productivity model? Second is, how do you drive career management to succeed in the second half? And third is, how do you bring life and values into the equation, and how do you leverage life as a catalyst? Now, majority of the people do not spend any time improving their learning model. So if you spend time converting time to experience consciously, and if you improve your learning model, you will have more success than the majority of the people. But if you said that itself is not enough, I want even greater success, then you have to solve the second problem of career management, which is how can you be successful in the second half of your career. And if you said even that is not enough, I want to be an absolutely visionary breakthrough leader who's a legacy creating leader, one in a million type, then you have to bring life into the equation. You have to bring your life, your values into the equation of success. So that are the three things which you have to solve to achieve great success. Thank you for listening to me. As I said, I do this with a sense of mission. So I'm also easily accessible on all mediums: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, everything. I also try and answer as many questions as I get on Facebook and LinkedIn and so on and so forth. So feel free to connect with me, and I will try and I publish a lot of content, and I try and answer questions. All the very best. Happy to take some questions on the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Molly. I really loved and thoroughly enjoyed your session. I particularly like the part on the honesty and integrity, and that reminds me of, the model that you presented reminds me of a dialogue from the movie, from one of the Harry Potter movie, where Dumbledore says, "There are two ways of doing things. One is right, another is difficult." So yeah. It is so. We have some questions for you, and in interest of time, we'll see how much we can cover. We have 15 minutes now, so yeah. So I'll recite the first question to you, which is coming from Kirtika Murgeval, and she is asking. How do you differentiate between the first and the second halves? Actually, that is also running in my mind. How individual can differentiate where your first half ends and the second half begins, or how do you differentiate your career or your life in first half and the second half?
Yeah, I think that's a excellent question, Kritika. Thank you for asking it. And that's why I said it's not mathematical. It's not 20 years in a 40-year career. It's not 2020. I think what happens in the first half is, in first half, we produce results based on systems, processes, and very active supervision from above us. Our managers play a huge role in us producing results. So it's systems and managers. In the second half, you produce results of your own back. Yeah, you don't have that much supervision. You're not leveraging only systems and processes. You're making a lot more thing happen. So one way of recognizing first, second half is what is helping you results. Are you producing results? Ecosystem and system and processes and managers, then you're in the first half. Are you producing results from back, then you're in a second half. I mean, an anecdotal way of saying it is, I like to say that in the first half, you need the company more than the company needs you. In the second half, the company should need you more than you need the company. That's another great way of knowing whether you are in the first half or the second half. Great question.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good idea, and when who needs who is a good point of differentiation. On the same follow-up, Abhishek asked us that which are those key things one must learn or improve for the second half, which are most critical?
Yeah. So I think basically, let's say if you take, and I've got 3 chapters, Abhishek, in the book on what you have to do to prepare to win the second half. I'll give you only one example out of it. So for example, in the first half, you can succeed by solving for low-hanging fruits. A lot of us come into a new job in the first half. The first year, we find a low-hanging fruit. We solve for it. We feel very successful. And then we get another job. We solve again another low-hanging fruit. Then we get another job. We solve again another low-hanging fruit. In the process, you can go through an entire career in your first half, solving only low-hanging fruits. And you never build up the skill for solving high-hanging fruits. Now you come to your second half, and second half you can't have a great career by solving low hanging fruits. That's what the junior people in the first half do. If you are in the second half, you must be able to solve for high hanging, more complex fruits. Yeah. Now if you have managed your career in a first half such a way that you only solved for low hanging fruits and you kept being successful by solving low hanging, when you come to the second half, you haven't prepared and you haven't skilled yourself to become capable of solving for high hanging fruits. Yeah. Now, this is a great example of how you prepare in the first half for the second half. So now if you have to do career management in your first half, where you have to say, I have also to now learn how to solve for high-hanging fruit, then you have to choose certain kind of more complex assignments where it is more difficult to succeed. You have to spend more time in assignment because to solve for high-hanging fruit, it takes 3-4 years. You cannot say, I'm running away in 18 months and I'm solving high-hanging fruit. Now, these are examples of how you make choices so as to prepare for success in the second half?
Yeah, thanks, Molly, for this. The next question comes on the on your chapter related to values and integrities, where Ravin is asking, as a leader or as a manager, how do you foster a culture of personal integrity in your organization?
Did you say the name was Robin?
Ravin Kar.
Raven. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Raven. Again, a great question. As a leader, how do you create a culture of integrity? And I have a very simple answer to it, which is role modeling. I think nothing defines integrity more than what leaders do. No amount of policies, processes, statements build integrity as much as role modeling of people. And if each one of us focuses on being a role model integrity person, then you will slowly find that the culture and the values of your organization starts to change. And you don't have to wait for everybody to change. You can be the leader. You can be the first person who chooses to become high integrity in your organization. You don't have to wait for others to start. You don't have to be the senior most person. You can lead the way, and you will find that you are a culture creator, you are a change creator, and you will become successful in that process.
We have a great message for you. Thanks, Ravan, for this. Role modeling is, role modeling is the best. I think as I reflect that who I follow in my organization, I see that I follow the one who has a high integrity. Anyways, just a good, very thank you note for you from Abhishek, who asked the things to learn, improve your second half, and you responded and he sent a very good message with a thank you note and saying that he just bought your book, must be in the market.
Thank you, Abhishek.
So now the next question comes from Ashish, and I think this is the last question we could take in interest of time. What is a good time frame to review the joint decision? You were talking about the quit and joint decisions. So what is a good time frame to review the joint decision?
I mean, I'm possibly not understanding the question well, but let me try and explain. I think the moment you have joined a company, and then you are in a new place. Now that's your new place, and then if you're reviewing the joint decision, it effectively means you're taking a decision on whether to quit again. Yeah, because that's what it means by reviewing the joint decision.
Yeah.
So here is the simplest way I like to say, you must be clear what's the criteria to take a quit decision. And in my judgment, there are only two reasons one can quit a company. One is learning, and second is fit. Factors like growth, salary, grades, etc. are not reasons to quit. As long as you are learning, and as long as you are experiencing a great culture fit and a values fit, you are in the right place. Because the combination of learning and fit will get you a great career, will get you the grades, will get you the salary, and will get you everything else. Yeah. You have to simplify the quit decision in your head and primarily chase learning and chase a values fit. These are the two most important drivers for success.
Yeah. Thank you, Molly. That was a great session. We had some brilliant questions and the equally awesome responses to those. I would again thanks everyone to join this session and request for your feedback at the end of this. And thank you, Molly, once again for sparing your valuable time with us. And thank you, Priya, for organizing this. And we will be in touch. Just for everyone's information, this webinar will be followed up by an in-person workshop by Molly in the Bangalore. We will send you more information about it tomorrow, where you can register for that workshop. So please do join us in Bangalore, whosoever in Bangalore. We will try to convince Molly to come to other cities as well. Till then, goodbye and have a good day.
Thank you, Vibhor, and I wish everybody success in their journeys of work and life.
Thank you, Molly.